had no Oh, there we are. Natasha had no Wi-Fi at our Baobab base, and so she had to race to town to get Wi-Fi. Thank you for the effort, Natasha. Natasha's our ex-situ coordinator at the Baobab and is one of the team of hand rearers. But obviously, while hand rearing is great, parent rearing is better. And she's going to share some insights in how we can get captive birds to parent rear and so that we can do less of the hand rearing. Over you to Natasha. Over to you.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yep, you're good to go.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you folks today. Basically, my talk is going to concentrate on an overview of some of the methods that we've applied at law school to try and get the parents to rear their own chicks, because at the Baobab, our first priority is to rear chicks for the reintroduction program. And so it's best if they are reared by their own kind. So I'm just going to run you through some of the methods that we have put in place. And with that, I'd also like to say this is many years of trial and error, mostly from Delisha Gunn's part. And so we'd like to thank her. I'm not sure if she's able to see the presentation at the moment. Like Lucy said, we have some internet issues back at home. Okay, so for starters, when you are hand rearing or planning to parent rear, it's really important to make sure you stock up on good food supply early on. All of those of you who have worked with ground-hornbills will know that they eat an astronomical amount of food, and as we've just heard from the gut study, it's quite constant. So best food supply to stock up on are mice. They are number one for rearing. Delisha always says you can feed a hornbill anything as long as it's included with some mice. With that, you can also get some many zoos make use of day-old chicks. At the Baobab, we like to grow the chicks for about 2 or 3 weeks, so it's got better consistency to it. And then you can also source chicken hearts. We try and get chicken hearts that are from free-range stock, and we try our best for organic. And then if you are going to source red meat, just ensure that it comes from a lead-free source. Then some of you who work in zoos will know that not all ground-hornbills are friendly during the breeding season. So if you are going to attempt to check nests or get the parents to rear their own young, make sure that you can or cannot go to the nest with the parents around. We at Baobab have 2 pairs, half of which you can go to the nest without having to worry about your head being knocked off. But then we also have a very aggressive other pair that we have to ensure that we close in the management camp so that we can safely check the nest and work with the eggs without having any accidents. Okay, the nest design and placement. This is really key to getting ground-hornbills to rear their own young. If you want a good nest is very important, and for us we try and use 18mm plywood. We found works best for birds in a captive environment, and it lasts more or less 2 seasons, and then you have to replace the floor. Very importantly is you've got to make sure there's a little strip at the entrance so that the birds can land without hurting their feet, and also ensure that you've got some drainage holes fitted to the nest for temperature regulation. A key aspect that we have found to contribute to the success of getting parents to rear is to put the nest box basically on a platform in the middle of the aviary where it's out in the open so that sufficient light can enter the nest. Often other institutions place their nests under roofs, and often we found that perhaps it makes it quite dark, so the parents can't see their eggs or chicks, and it can result in mortalities. Then before the rearing season takes off properly, you already have to start getting the birds into the right behavior. And one of the things that we do is to provide the birds with leaves. Now, in the start of the breeding season, you can supply them with oak leaves because they're easily attainable for captive environment. But when you start to see the birds going down and you see that they are going to lay, you will replace the oak leaves with indigenous leaves. Their structure is just a lot better and they're not as slippery. You will find that the birds will throw out the leaves and that's okay, it's their leaves. But from time to time, you just need to replace them and you put the leaves both in the nest and on the ground so that there are leaves for the parents to pick up and then take to the nest. Okay, so behavioral changes is really important, and this is where keepers need to keep an extra eye and ear on the ground for the breeding season. Ground-hornbill mating behavior is quite conspicuous, and just because you did not see it happen doesn't mean it didn't happen. From our pairs, I've often not seen them mate, but I've seen other behavioral changes that will give you clues that the female is possibly going to go down and breed or lay her eggs. Some of the behavior that you can look out for would be the female spends an extraordinary amount of time in her nest as opposed to being out in the aviary as per usual. The male will start collecting food that is fed and take it back to her and feed her in the nest. You'll also see mate guarding when she is out of the nest. So all of these behaviors you need to take extra attention to. And when you no longer see her coming out of the nest, you will know that more or less around this time she has possibly laid an egg. And that's when you will then go and check the nest. When working with eggs, make sure that you are very gentle. Always keep them in the same position as you have found them when handling them. Don't spend an extraordinary amount of time at the nest. Do what you need to do and leave the aviary so that the birds can get back to it. So we all know that the eggs are laid usually in increments of 5 days between the two. So we usually only candle the eggs once they have been laid a few days later to see whether they are fertile. And then we also candle the eggs during mid-incubation to make sure the embryo is still developing. But for the rest of the time, we just let the female be and just incubate her own eggs. Candling can also be used as a technique to help estimate hatching dates for the chicks. That's very important because around about that time is when you're going to be starting to change the way you feed the captive pairs. Also, by watching the behavior and realizing when your female has laid her eggs will then also help you to estimate your hatching date. So that's quite important. And then the real work starts when the female has hatched her eggs. And this is just a little video of one of our females with one of her chicks 2 years back. Okay, weighing is a crucial part in getting the chicks to 21 days or a month. When weighing, please make sure that you either put the birds in the management camp or that your pair is happy for you to be around the nest once again. Do not talk to the chick. You can vocalize like the parents would. It sometimes puts the chick to ease, but try not to talk to the chick or the birds around you. We weigh the chick every day for the first month of its life. Usually with ground-hornbills, 21 days. If you can get your chick to 21 days, then you're sort of all good. But it's a critical time period before then. We stop weighing the birds after a month because it's also the time period when they become a lot more aware and are a lot easier to imprint. Also, the feathers start coming out, so it becomes very uncomfortable for the chick when you have to remove it from the nest, put it on a scale. So we tend to only weigh and check the nest every day for the first month. After that, you will taper off your nest checks to every second day till eventually you feel comfortable enough to only do it once a week to make sure that the chick is growing as it should. It's very important not to weigh your chick on a day that's very cold or if it has rained, because you will flush the female from the nest and she will then have to climb back in the nest all wet and then the chick will chill. So make sure not to check on the chick if it is really cold. Also, very importantly, we weigh the chick before we have fed any of the birds, so that you can actually get actual weight gain for that specific day. Once you have weighed your chick, make sure that you check within the nest box to find proper formed feces. This is extremely important because it will tell you a lot about the bird's health, especially its gut. We all know that ground-hornbill chicks very easily get constipated. And so if you find pieces of meat undigested within the food, that will give you clues as to things that you need to tweak. But if you find beautifully formed feces, you know that you are doing a good job. After that, in the morning, especially in the beginning, we start our feeding rounds. For the first month, at least, we'll feed 5 times per day, every 2 hours. And then the food prep is probably one of the most important parts. Because the birds live in aviaries, we have to supply them with the food that they would otherwise collect in the environment. And often people give the birds the same food that they would on any normal day, but you've got to tweak and change how you feed the pairs during the breeding season. So sorry if anybody is squeamish for this picture, but it's quite important to show how it is done. So if you were to calculate how much food to feed, you would follow the same as you would for a hand-reared chick, plus the amount of food that you would feed your 2 adult pairs on any given day, and you will then divide the amount into 5 feeds, or how many feeds you are doing for that specific day. In the beginning, we will take pinkies without any hair, and then we'll just snip along the back just to open up the skin. We then remove the fat from the chicken hearts and we snip those in pieces. And from the chicks, we will then remove the fur as well as the crop and the bones, and we then snip the meat into smaller pieces. As the chick grows, you will start adding fur and the bones, and you will also then start to cut down on the number of times you feed the ground-hornbills. But remember, even though you're cutting down on the number of feeds, you have to increase the amount of food. Very similar to what you would do if you were hand rearing the chick. A very good way to check that you are feeding your pairs enough to feed the chick is after feeding, if you go and check and you find 1 or 2 morsels of food left behind in a plate, then you know you're giving them the right quantity. But please make sure that they don't leave an entire plate behind, because you don't want to encourage predators or mice or rats into your aviary, so it's quite a fine line. Very important to add to the food from up until day 15 to 21 is Ringer's lactate, as you would for a normal hand-reared chick. Don't forget to add your supplements, and with supplements, please read the instructions on the bottle and only feed as per those instructions. When you overdo supplements or underdo supplements, you can often end up with an imbalance, and it can lead to metabolic bone disease. In the summer season, after big rains, you'll usually see us running around with nests trying to catch flying ants. Flying ants are an amazing source of protein. They're very rich and very good for growing chicks. So don't forget to add your flying ants to your food mix. This is just a photo to show that why we do snip the food up in the small pieces. It gives the male the opportunity to pack amount of food that he would like to take back to the nest of size that the chick will be able to swallow comfortably without becoming impacted. And just a video to show that which I've just explained. Then for the rest, as I previously said, you will then cut down on the nest checks till eventually you only check once a week. But in the interim, please do make sure that your chick that is being parent-reared reaches its growing milestones as you would for a hand-reared chick. Some of those would be to make sure that the chick starts to turn black around about day 4. The eyes usually open around about day 8 to 10, and slowly but surely the feathers start to show from approximately day 15. Very importantly is to make sure that the beak is forming in a correct position. Often when there are nutritional issues, the beak will be the first body part that will tell you that something is wrong. And also that the bird is preening itself, that it's standing up on its hocks, giving you an alert feeding response, and that the feathers are coming out beautifully, and especially the tail and on top of the head. Those are some of the key parameters to make sure the chick does meet, to make sure that the parents are actually doing a good job. Now, I put this picture in because even though it might sound very simple, it's actually very crucial. Often, especially in nests that we have made ourselves, artificial nests, they're quite large inside, or much larger often than those found in the wild. And we sometimes do this on purpose because sometimes the males like to spend time with the female in the nest, and invariably sometimes they can cause some damage to the chicks. So our nests are a little bit larger, and as a result sometimes the leaves become quite widespread. So when you check your nest, ensure that there's an adequate amount of leaves under the chick. If not, the legs will slip and then you end up with slip tendons or malformed legs and feet. So adding a few leaves under your chick from time to time, if you do see it becoming in short supply, is actually very crucial to make sure your bird will be able to stand and walk one day. So don't forget that. Don't put too many leaves in the nest. You don't want to change the shape too much, as the parents will just throw out all the excessive leaves and then perhaps would be for nothing. This is the behavior you would like to see from a bird that has been correctly reared by its parents and have not been imprinted by the keeper. And this is the kind of behavior that's very suitable for a bird that's aimed for reintroduction. It's nice and wild and definitely doesn't like to see my face, which is a very good quality bird to be reintroduced into a group. When it comes to fledging, do not fret if your chick doesn't fledge exactly on day 84. They sometimes do take a bit longer. If there is no medical reason to worry, let the chick fledge on its own time. What is really important to watch out for around fledging date is that you see this little head pop out at the entrance, starting to show interest in the surrounding environment. This also shows you that the bird is able to stand, which is really important. Once the chick has fledged, they will often climb back in the nest when they feel intimidated or when it's time to go to sleep. They'll roost in their actual nest. This is normal, so don't stress when that happens. Give them time to acclimatize to their new environment. One of the other tools that we use to help our pairs with the breeding process is spraying the nest. And it's really important for the captive pairs and institutions to do this because often our captive pairs breed long before the wild counterpart and long before our proper rainy season starts. Now, rain is very crucial for the humidity in the nest, for the eggs to produce properly, and especially if you'll see in a very dry environment, young chicks will flake quite excessively because the environment around them is very dry. So spray the nest and the surrounding area every day in the hottest part of the day to try and just assist the parents and the proper egg production, and to also help those little chicks not to flake so much. So in a nutshell, those are some of the methods that we have implemented at the Baobab to try and get our pairs to breed. And I will leave you with this little video to end off my talk for tags. a little sleeping, not so small chick. Thank you for your time, and if anybody has any questions.
Thanks very much, Tash, and thanks for the extra effort of racing to the nearest town for Wi-Fi. Are there any questions for Natasha? I see there's one from William. Natasha, would you spray fine mist into the nest and onto the chick?
We don't really spray inside the nest, but we do on the roof and on the back and on the platform. But if some fine spray does enter the nest, it's not the end of the world, because in the wild sometimes these chicks are exposed to actual rain coming into the nest. Just be careful that if you do that, to make sure that your nest has proper drainage holes so that you don't drown your chick.
Katya's asked a question, Tash. She says, great presentation. Do you know the temperature in the nest when the chick starts to pant?
Not from our nest at the baobab, no. Although when they do pant, it is extremely hot in the outside environment. Usually at baobab, our temperatures reach 35 to 37 degrees during that time. So it gets extremely hot, but no, not in the nest itself. Sorry, Katya, I can't help you on that one.
Tash, maybe we should put a couple of eye buttons in the season and see if we can get a handle on when that is, because that'll also probably help with Carrie's research. So let's maybe try and install a few.
Sounds good.
Zwane, you have a question?
Yes. Thank you very much, Lucy. Thanks, Natasha, for the presentation. So, Lucy, this is Zwelakhe Zondi from Sandy. I just use a different name to log into Zoom.
Hi, Zwelakhe. Sorry.
No worries. Just wanted to find out from Natasha, what are the benefits of hand rearing versus parent rearing, particularly for reintroductions into the wild?
There are various benefits. Number one, I am a hand rearer, but I'm not a ground-hornbill. So I can't necessarily instill the right social behavior. And I don't talk hornbill. So when a chick is reared by their own kind, they learn all of those correct social cues and how to actually be a ground hornbill. Those that we hand rear, if you do hand rear them correctly, you can still get very good quality chicks. We have a good hand rearing protocol, although the chicks invariably are not as wild as those that are parent reared. Parent reared just does take the cherry on the cake. They are the best quality for reintroduction. Those that are hand reared, and if you don't do the hand rearing properly, it is very often easy to imprint on them very easily. When people work with birds every day, it's very easy to love on them a little too much, and then they become extremely tame, and then they become very poor at reintroduction stock. So the parent rearing is first prize. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you very much.
And then just to add to that, as well, like the reason we actually built the baobab was to make sure that the artificially reared chicks had the best possible socialization. Not all of our captive facilities had, the right sort of setup of aviary and, too many people around and things like that. So we were advised to centralize and standardize, and that really has been paying dividends.